the Republican Party eliminate primaries. Now, actually, believe it or not, President Trump does have opposition. Former Massachusetts governor Bill Weld. And he's like, you know, what gives? This is not right. This is not the way you're supposed to do this. So, I wonder how that's all going to work out. But it's something that I think we should be concerned about because you want this to be a democratic process all the way around. Everybody should have the right to vote. Democrat, Republican, Independent, unaffiliated. You should be able to vote. And I'd be distressed as if this happened on the Democratic side with an incumbent Democratic president. I think there's some things that we need to be concerned about, whether regardless of party. But boy, oh boy, it wasn't even close in Nevada. It wasn't even close. Bernie Sanders broke on through, and in spite of the pushback from the culinary union, right? That was very interesting because people were wondering, you know, with this very powerful union that sent out a memo. They did not endorse anyone. They sent out a memo, though, saying, look, his plan is going to take your health plan from you. But in 5 of the 6 hotels on the Strip, Bedalia, he came in number 1 at all the caucuses.
Yes.
So there is a break, and I've been asking this question in rank and file, and labor management. It's not quite the same. So I want to know from you, what do you think about this weekend's results? Is it now time to claim to allow Bernie Sanders to be the front runner? And what will this mean? I tell you, there was a freak out all over the mainstream media. No one wanted to do that, and they were warning us, you know. I think James Carville, who is a friend, I just disagree with him on this. He looked at the camera on one of these shows and said, "Hi, Vlad," as in Putin. I said, come on, you guys, stop it. We have interfered in elections. That is, the United States has done that. People have interfered in our elections. It's all wrong. But you don't need to taint Bernie Sanders with this. And I kind of, honestly, I felt that was coming, right? Because as he was gathering strength, I said, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. So, everybody, I want to know what you're thinking, what you are thinking today. What do you think about what happened in Nevada? And I'm going to call it Nevada because that's how I grew up calling it. I think it sounds a little softer. What happened in these caucuses? 46.6% Bernie Sanders got. We're going to talk about that today with our panel and you. 773-763-9278. And of course, we're on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show station. So please like and subscribe. And of course, Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook. Like and share. I want to hear from you. I want to get some feedback. And then tonight, Lady B, everybody come on and join us.
Yes.
Because we're going to be at 930 50th Street starting at 6. Doors open at 6. And at 6:45 p.m. Central Standard Time, we will be up on Facebook talking about this. Because now it is on and cracking. And we're going to be in South Carolina for their primaries. People are wondering what's going to happen there. Steyer is surprisingly strong in second place. What is that going to mean? And how far ahead must Joe Biden finish, if he finishes first, in order to retain the credibility? Because air is just eking out of his candidacy as we speak. And so what will that mean? He's depending upon the black vote. And the black vote in the South, which is Super Tuesday, which is in a few more days, Super Tuesday is powered by the black vote, which is being empowered by this reverse migration. You know, black people were chased up to the North by lynchings because as we became more successful coming out of slavery, we would get lynched and terrorized out of our Southern homes. So that's how we ended up in the North. But now more and more African Americans are moving back to the South. And they are the political power that we're beginning to kind of lose up here. We're gaining in the South. That's how you got a Stacey Abrams. That's why you have Jamie Harrison, who could unseat Lindsey Graham. That could very well happen. He's never gotten more than like 55-56% of the vote. And you have, at the beginning of this campaign cycle, you had 400,000 African Americans who were unregistered to vote in South Carolina. Now it's down to 200,000. and you have more than 1 million who are registered to vote in South Carolina. 80% of black folks who live in South Carolina are registered to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think we need to look at that for all of our progressive politics. Get registered to vote. Do not let anyone tell you that your vote does not matter, because it really, really does. We flipped the House of Representatives on your vote in 2018. And you can flip everything in 2020 if you get out and vote. So if you are registered to vote, remember, you keep hearing from me, 34 million people were purged from the voter rolls between 2014 and 2018. 2014 to 2016, 16 million. 2016 to 2018, 18 million, and the numbers have been accelerating. So you need to call 1-866-OUR-VOTE or go to vote.org. 1-866-OUR-VOTE or vote.org. It takes you a few minutes to find out if you have been purged. That's what you need to do. And you need to do it regularly up until the election, so that voter registration doesn't close on you, because Bedalia Tejeda and Bedalia T. Tejeda, you'll get purged.
Yes.
Santita Jackson, Santita J. Jackson, you get purged. You're trying to register in two places. Ironically enough, a lot of people who have multiple homes, like a lot of people in the Trump administration, I think even some of his children, are registered in two places, and that can happen if you spend more time. I know most people can't relate to that, but if you spend more time, like if you go to college,
Right.
you know, you might, we don't know what the rules are, and people go on to get registered. So that having been said, you know, we're going to talk about this weekend election, what this means for the progressive movement. I mean, because look, let us not forget about Elizabeth Warren. She didn't get lost in the sauce. She finished in the top 4. And if you combine her 10% and Bernie's 46%, that's 56% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Bernie Sanders finished higher as people did the ranked choice voting. He was number 2 in more places. So hey, it's on and cracking.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that tonight, 930 East 50th Street. Can't wait to talk with you about that today. So let's go through a few of these headlines, Lady B, as we bring on our panel, as we bring you on to talk about what happened this weekend. What happened? What happened? You know, everybody's talking about the Bernie Bros, you know, before I get into these headlines. And there's a study that suggests that the Twitter bots have had a substantial impact on spreading climate misinformation. I'm wondering if these Twitter bots are the Bernie Bros, too. Everybody gets really excited.
Never
I
know.
don't really trust us, you know, cyberspace, because I don't know who's out there. I don't know what this is. We find that a lot of people have these tens of millions of followers, that many of the millions are false. So I just think we need to kind of cool our jets a bit and figure out what's going on. Okay, let's get to these headlines. Tom Steyer has qualified for the South Carolina debate just ahead of the primary. It's tomorrow night, Tuesday, in Charleston, South Carolina. How will that go for him? How will he do on that stage? President Trump is in India, everybody. Now, it's very interesting because he is being celebrated in India by their Prime Minister Modi, who just pushed through legislation that discriminates against Muslims. So 100,000 people were in the stadium waiting for him. So we'll see how this goes. And as I shared with you, The Guardian has a wonderful article that I'm going to put up about how Black Americans' reverse migration is reshaping this vote in South Carolina. It absolutely is. More than 60% of the vote in South Carolina in the Democratic primary is African American. So what will that mean? Okay. Bernie Sanders has sent the Democratic establishment into, what do they say, panic mode on the strength of his resounding victory in Nevada. What do you think about that? And he's facing backlash, everybody, because he had a tweet in which he said, the Republican establishment won't stop me.
Yeah.
The Democratic establishment won't stop me. Let us get to victory. He said, I've got news for the Republican establishment. I've got news for the Democratic establishment. They can't stop us. Okay, so what do you think about that? What do you think about that? And what do you think about all of the media who have gone absolutely crazy? Oh, wow. There's an MSNBC pundit who I like very much, he's a professor at Morgan State University, Dr. Jason Johnson, who said that these Sanders staffers are like misfit black girls. Ouch. What
Well,
was that about? I don't know. But you're hearing a lot of talk about the Bernie bros and on and on and on, and how mean Bernie Sanders uh, followers are. It's really slandering them. But Bernie Sanders said, you know what, how can we stop the workers who want higher wages? That's his response. Um, so we'll see about how this goes. And then Chris Matthews, for his portion, compared the Sanders Nevada win to the Nazi invasion. What is going on with everybody? It's a
mm,
freak out. It's funny. When someone's greed is rewarded, we call that capitalism. When my needs are fulfilled, that's called communism and socialism. Isn't that
yeah,
strange? I just,
yeah,
I'm just
it is.
asking. I think that we need to. You got to do a reset. Got to do a reset. You know what? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those are socialist policies. But we're a mix. So is the Interstate Highway. All of that is a mix. But look, everybody is panicking. Did you know that 62% of the Democratic caucus goers supported Medicare for all? These are the issues. Issues were driving people, not someone's label. That's right. It's not. It's not. So you kind of have to look beyond all of these headlines, everybody, and look at what's really, really going. In the meantime, Bloomberg is quietly plotting a brokered convention strategy. Now, he has not run in one race, he's not won anything yet, but he has spent a lot of money and he is rising in the polls. At least he was until the debate last week.
Mm,
Well, according to this Politico report, he is quietly plotting a brokered convention strategy. Mike Bloomberg, according to this Politico report, is privately lobbying Democratic Party officials and donors allied with his moderate opponents to flip their allegiance to him and block Bernie Sanders in the event of a brokered national convention. What do you think about that?
mm,
Do you think it's going to work? Well,
mm,
that's why in the second hour with Dave Daly, the author of Unrigged and Rat Effed, we're going to talk about this brokered convention because it's becoming more and more obvious that one candidate might not reach 1991, 1,991 delegates, but Bernie Sanders was the only one on the stage last week who said that the person who garners the most uh, delegates should be the nominee. So, what do you think about that? Now, everybody, let us look at. Did you see the interview last week with Rod Blagojevich, our governor, former governor,
mm-hmm.
and Anderson Cooper? I was disappointed because it was so hostile. Black Illinois Democrats, though, are very excited about his win, about his having his sentence commuted. We're going to talk about that tonight too. You know, what's the split here? I'm just saying, it's just gotta look, everybody. The stock markets are slumping as the coronavirus spreads in Europe. Yeah, that's most Americans, according to different studies, are not taking this coronavirus outbreak seriously. But it has the potential to become a pandemic. It's not there yet, but it does have potential, everybody. So we need to think about that. Barbara Smith, B. Smith, those of you who've spent a lot of time on the East Coast, or if you watched B. Smith, this African American woman 30 years ago who really became the lifestyle guru. She made her transition 70 years ago, 70 years old, early onset Alzheimer's. And she was one of the first African American supermodels. And she was on the cover of Mademoiselle in the 70s. Fabulous, gorgeous woman, and a beautiful, beautiful spirit. And she, it became clear in her early 60s that her memory was diminishing. And it turns out she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And so she made her transition, and we just continue to pray for her. President Donald Trump, very quietly, continues to govern everybody. He has quietly issued a memo that could abolish union rights for 750,000 federal workers. So while we are running for office, everybody, I think what you need to do is also pay attention to people who are still governing. The Chicago Bulls were triumphant over the Washington Wizards, 126 to 117. The Blackhawks, though, they went down to the Stars, 2-1. And Friday, the markets closed. Wow, you know, it was very interesting. 227 points, right?
Mm-hmm.
For Dow, Nasdaq, 174, S&P 35 points. Wow, wow. And today we're expecting a high of 40 degrees, and it is going to rain, and maybe more. We're expecting a storm that could come here by Wednesday when we're trying to get out of here too. All right, everybody, let's talk.
Okay.
Let's talk. We have a whole lot of people who want to talk with us this morning, and I've got this fantastic panel who can give us some insight into what's happening, what happened in Nevada, and what could be happening in South Carolina. Let me bring on, I've got Latasha Brown from Black Voters Matter. I've got Dwight McKee. I've got C.K. Hoffler, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, the president-elect of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the country, excuse me, in the world. More than 65,000 lawyers, and in fact, she will be deploying them when she becomes president of this bar association in the fall because we're trying to protect our voting rights. And of course, our attorney Robert Patillo. My father said he is so brilliant. Oh my gosh, but he said that about all of you guys. Latasha Brown, I have got about 3 minutes before I go to break. Latasha Brown, what happened in Nevada, and why is the Democratic establishment freaking out?
People are every single election, regardless. I know political pundits are saying what candidate should win, what candidate is projected to win, and consistently in every single primary that's been held so far, the popular vote has gone to Bernie Sanders. And so while there are a lot of critique about Bros and critique about his candidacy, he has consistently pulled out the popular vote. And so I think that's sending a message. That's sending a message that people, everyday people, are really, really concerned with some of the issues that Bernie is raising in his campaign. That aside from the labels, there are folks that say, well, he's not a true Democrat. He's a socialist. The bottom line is people are, when I've been talking to people, Bernie's conversation and discussion around health care, around the inequities of economics in this country, all of those things are obviously resonating with people. And so I think that the establishment, the Democratic establishment, I think there's a lot of truth around that. We're seeing it play itself out. They are nervous. I think the establishment in general, I think the Democrat and Republican establishment, in many ways, are very, very nervous. But we've got to really be honest about what we're seeing in the numbers so far. And what we are seeing is that the popular Democratic vote are really looking for something different. They're supporting a progressive. They're hungry. They want a progressive. And regardless of what we've seen with the pundits on the media, time and time again, Bernie's campaign continues to rise. And months ago, I told people this based on we're working through my work in Black Voters Matter. We're working in 11 states. We have not endorsed a candidate, but I've been reporting what has been happening on the ground, where I've seen the most organization on the ground, where I've seen people literally work out of passion around the campaign, particularly around these issues that Bernie Sanders is raising, has been the Sanders campaign. So I just think we're playing out what has been happening for months on the ground that we've been witnessing and what we've been seeing. And I think we're going to, I think we're headed for really, really rocky road. But I think the numbers are pointing to something that we can't ignore.
Well, we're going to have to pay attention. We're going to have to pay attention to what the people are saying. Now, we've got the Democratic and Republican establishments, and then for our purposes here, you're looking at the Democratic establishment freaking out. But guess what? They need to listen to the people. Now, who are you representing? We need to figure that out. Or they need to figure that out, because they're letting people know, look, between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on this past weekend, they got 56% of the vote. And they went past their union to vote on issues that are most important to them. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Perfect.
WCPT
Yeah.
820.
Okay.
Here's the
Yeah.
latest Chicago traffic update.
Great.
On the inbound Eisenhower at Manheim, the slip ramp is blocked right now. The right side.
Does not have that anymore in South Carolina. So, what does all of this mean? It means that progressive voters, black voters, people of color, Hispanics, we all matter. And right now, we need to get what we need, not just who we want. So, we got a tremendous panel, and we're talking to you on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Please like and share, everybody. Like and share. And over on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show. Like and subscribe, and let's get this conversation going. Because as I shared with Congressman Bobby Rush last week, Lady B, and Latasha Brown and Dwight McKee and Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Attorney Robert Patillo, when we talked about his support for Michael Bloomberg, I said, I can appreciate that. Don't agree with it, but I appreciate it and respect you. Will always do that. My question is, please tell him, or should I say, all I need you to do is tell him when you go see Mayor Bloomberg that this matter regarding stop and frisk, or as you said, Attorney Hoffler, stop, frisk, beat, and kill, this is something we're not over. This and the support of highly placed African Americans is not going to change that. Got to talk about that, everybody. So very quickly, let me go through my panel, and then we're going to come to you callers. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what did we see this weekend?
Well, we saw Bernie Sanders really performing in a way that gave him a decisive lead once again over the other candidates. And I think that certainly if I were Joe Biden, if I were actually any of the other candidates, especially Bloomberg, I would be very, very concerned because Bernie Sanders' decisive victory just in that particular primary signals that he has broad-based support from young folks, from older folks, from middle-class folks, from upper-class folks, pretty much across the board, African Americans, Latinos, and really, really significant areas. And so when we are looking at South Carolina, and Bernie has already captured large numbers of African American votes. He always has. So when we look to South Carolina, where black and brown votes will really matter, African American women can make a difference. I think that it's going to be very interesting because I do believe that Bernie is going to maintain his lead.
Okay. Attorney Robert Patillo? Attorney Patillo, what did we see?
What I think we saw is with caucuses is a measure of organization on the ground, money in people's pockets, and also enthusiasm. Bernie, throughout the electoral season, even going back to 2016, has had the most enthusiastic supporters. That translated both in Iowa and New Hampshire. And going into Nevada, what we saw is the same holds true with the caucus. But now the question is, we go into Super Tuesday, as we go through South Carolina, where does he go for wins on Super Tuesday? He'll do very well in California. He'll do well in some of the more progressive liberal states. But as we go through South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, will his messaging shine there the way it has shined other places? And as he is now the front runner, will he get that same scrutiny that we saw other front runners get? Remember, when Elizabeth Warren was at the head of the pack for those couple of weeks, there were all these calls for her to explain how is she going to pay for all of her plans. The minute that she explained how to pay for Medicare for all, her campaign fell apart, it collapsed, and it hasn't come back since. Same with Kamala Harris when she had her moment in the sun after the I was that girl moment. We saw that once she got scrutiny, her campaign began to fall apart. So will the media start asking Bernie the tougher questions about his agenda, which he's always just kind of yada, yada, yada away, and will his campaign be able to maintain through that? I think those are the questions we're going to see going forward. And then because Bernie Sanders has been a national entity for so long, anybody who has 40 years of video has 40 years of statements they wish they hadn't made. Anybody who has 6 weeks of video has 6 weeks of statements they wish they hadn't made. So when will those start rising to the front of the pack, and when will they, and who are going to try to exploit that the most? Some are now saying that Bloomberg might take his massive media cannon and turn it away from Trump temporarily and turn it on to Bernie. through Super Tuesday, and how will that affect the race? So the more voting that happens, the more influx we are, as opposed to getting more clarity. And then we also have the issue of the hangers on. What we saw in 2016 was the reason Trump won wasn't because he had the majority of support, but because people like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, some of the others stayed in the race far longer than they were ever viable, and they splintered the establishment vote, which led to Trump winning. So when you see Klobuchar coming in, I think at 0.4% or at the bottom of the caucuses, when you see Buttigieg, where he doesn't really have a path to victory after New Hampshire, when you see Tom Steyer, who is taking votes away from Biden in South Carolina, the question is how long are they going to stay in the race, and what impact will they have on? Will somebody come and tap them on the shoulder and tell them, good race, good job so far, but it's time for you to head on home and get behind the eventual nominee? We don't really have the party bosses of stature who could do that anymore. Anyone besides perhaps President Obama would have the power to get people out of the race, especially the little flux that we have currently. So those are the things we have to look at going into South Carolina, going to Super Tuesday, which is going to really shape the race going forward.
Wow. Dwight McKee, how do you see things?
Well, I see things pretty much like he does, is that I think there's a disconnection between Bernie and the DNC and the voting population. And whereas the DNC say they are concerned about Bernie having appeal because he's a democratic socialist, that could be a factor, but there's also a factor that once if Bernie wins without him, who are they and what role do they play forthcoming? And there's a real danger that he can almost do with the Democrats what Trump did with the Republicans, is that I don't want to call it a cult of personality, but he becomes the dominant force in the Democratic Party without the DNC's blessings. How that's going to impact the convention is my question. Will this be a broker convention, a Stop Bernie convention, or will they get behind him as a front runner and put the resources in him, invest the resources in him as they invested in Hillary and Obama? That's the question that I would be asking.
Let me go to some of these callers because they have a lot that they want to say today. Is this James?
Yes.
James?
How you doing? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, babe. What's on your mind?
Hi. The weekend was wonderful, and here's the problem. The problem is that the Democrats, they don't get the message. So when Barack ran as a progressive, now he didn't govern as a progressive, but when he ran, the people were behind him. Now we got this idiot in the White House who he spent his time lying during the campaign on progressive issues, and he got elected. The Democrats don't realize that the people want progressive issues, and that's why Bernie is looking good. And this thing about taking health care from 143 million people is disingenuous and a lie. He's not going to take health care away from the people. These people will get health care, Medicare for all. What he is doing is taking away high insurance premiums, high insurance deductibles, high insurance copays, and that's what the Democrats aren't realizing. And that's my comment, Santita.
I hear you, but you know they're not Democrats. They're corporate-crats and corporate cans. I mean, because this is a corporatocracy, and so we don't need to call anybody names. You just need to understand their politics so that you can know what you need to do. Let me go to you, Maine. What's on your mind, Maine? My main man. What's on your mind?
Hey, all right. Yeah. Well, my thing is they give Sanders just for that very reason, and they want to give us Biden. They want to give the black people Biden because he was with Obama. It's like an assumption or assume that blacks are going to vote for Biden. I mean, all through that thing they had, but they wanted. They assumed that blacks would vote for Biden just because no matter because he was with Obama.
But he did carry a lead, I think, because of that. But what happened?
Yeah, well, they listen to the actual issue. What is his stand on the actual issues? And when it comes to that, he's a corporate Democrat. First thing he started talking about is money and how to cover the Wall Street and the others as to, well, if you don't want total free health care, you don't always have to accept it. That means that they always try to get that little shoe in to the corporate Democrats. I mean, to the corporate establishment and the oligarchs and the capitalists. And so this is what he's about. And Sanders is about the people. His thing is free education, free health care, and the like.
But you know, I know, but you know what, Maine? I don't. He's not saying free health care. Nothing is free. He's not saying free education. You know what he is saying? Your tax dollars, which pay for the Pentagon and everything else, they need to be apportioned here. And see, we need to stop saying free because there's nothing free. Nothing. You know, like slavery wasn't free labor; it was unpaid labor, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
understand that nothing is free. But like you said, that things could be switched. They have given $3 trillion to the top. $1.5 trillion when Ray Goon was in, and now another $1.5 trillion with Trump being in there. So that's $3 trillion that have went straight to the top, and what is trickled down? A drip here and a drop there. So this thing about that Sanders is going to be a bad choice and all that is ludicrous, because he's speaking for the people. See, he's people over money, not money over people.
Okay.
And especially the DNC, they're a corporate organization too, and they're looking at that money. And so that's why they have trying to get this negativity towards Sanders. And I hear they are also jumping on what's her name, OAC, the young lady.
Well, you know, you know what it is, Maine. They're jumping on this is because it's not even money that would go to the party. It's money that they're protecting for the corporations, and I think we need to be very clear on that, so that we can know how we need to vote, and we need to get our own interest taken care of. You know, I love you, Maine. Let me go to you, Dave from San Francisco. What's on your mind, Dave?
Well, no, Santita. Yeah, you had a good line about, oh, good grief, just a couple of seconds ago. The America can buy in bulk. You know, and this whole idea of socialism, well, the cronies are the ones that want to trick America into buying through their company only with, like, no bid contracts. And America...
Oh, you know what? Dave, call us back from San Francisco. Before I go to you, Mark, Latasha, what are you hearing? Because you're doing a bus tour. You're doing these bus tours around the country, and you are talking to people on the ground.
You know what I am hearing. It's interesting because there's a mixed bag. You know, on the ground in the communities that I'm going in the South. You know, a lot of the, particularly black voters, are very practical and pragmatic. And many of, there's kind of this concern with a lot of the black voters that I've been talking to around this idea of who will be the candidate, and could Bernie Sanders actually be, win Trump, be Trump. And so in the last couple of days, what I can tell you is that in the last couple of days, Nevada has been an indicator where I've been hearing people explore much differently. I've been having a different couple of conversations with people who I just kind of stay in contact with on the ground in the various states that we're working in, that now I'm hearing a softening around, wait a minute, perhaps maybe he is going to be the candidate. What is it that we need to do? Is this possible? And so, because I think that there are a couple of things that are at work here. One, I think that there's an issue around particularly Bernie's campaign itself, that there are folks who have some legitimate concerns around how some of his followers, how they represent themselves online. And so there's a tension there. There's actually a racial tension there, particularly on Twitter, and that I've heard a lot from the ground. That people saying, he has some his supporters are racist. They don't like some of the things that they quote and they put up. So there's one piece, and then there's this other piece that I'm hearing from people, including my aunt. This was really telling for me. My aunt is 85 years old in Alabama. Was adamant that she was going to support Biden. And the other day I called her. She said, 3 days ago, I called her and she said, I think I'm going to vote for the old man. I said, the old man? She said, yeah, what's his name? And she said, I said, Bernie Sanders. She said, that's the one.
Really?
Yes. She says, I like the things that he's saying about health care. My prescriptions are just too high. So I think that there's and aside from Bernie, I think when you look at the Bernie and the Elizabeth Warren vote together, like what is cast a vote together, the majority of the Democratic base has gone for progressive candidates. We saw the same thing, but that just doesn't start. That's not just with Bernie and with Elizabeth Warren. In 2018, we saw the same thing. That part of what was the driver of the Democratic sweep in the House was that people were voting for candidates that were progressive, highly progressive candidates. When you come down to Georgia, in a state that has traditionally been a Republican stronghold, you saw candidates like Stacey Abrams, a black woman progressive, who garnered more Democratic votes than any candidate for governor, than any candidate in the history of the Democratic primary in that state. When you go down to Florida, you had a highly progressive black man, Andrew Gillum, who ran for governor, who we saw the same thing. When you went to Mississippi, when there was Mike Espy running for Senate, even though he didn't win, he garnered more votes than any other candidate since 1972, even though he's more of a moderate. But he's progressive as well, but he's closer to being a moderate. My point is, there is an appetite for progressive policies and progressive candidates that it seems that the Democratic establishment continues to overlook. And I think that will be one, I think that can ultimately wind up being the death of the party. Secondly, I think we're going to see, we're going to be in a tumultuous ride, I think, for this year. But I think this is even beyond the Trump. All the trends have been saying, all of what I've been noticing on the ground, people are tired. Folks are not saying that, even when we're hearing Trump say, oh, yeah, the unemployment rate, the economy is doing good. There is a question, good for who? I know people who are working 2 jobs and can barely afford their rent. Folks are very concerned about health care and health care access and the cost of their insurance. People are very concerned when they're seeing this concentration of wealth to folks at the top, that there's 1%, but then people at the bottom and working class people are not getting ahead. Even the middle class is not growing, it's shrinking. So I think that there's another fundamental issue that is at play here that is actually beyond what we're seeing in the candidates, that somehow I think even in the national media is getting overlooked, that there is a serious appetite for the Democratic base for a progressive that will speak to the issues that everyday people are very concerned and have anxiety around. And it can't just be a message of, we've got to beat Trump. Yes, folks want to beat Trump, but people also want to survive and want to live and want to get paid for their work and want to have fair wages and want to be able to afford having quality housing and education. And so I think that is what we're also seeing now. I think we're seeing a shift of support for progressive candidates, because I think that they're speaking to those issues. And somehow that is getting marginalized in the discussion that makes it about, like, the candidate, the flaws of the candidate, when ultimately people are sending a message that they want something different. And I think we're going to see that not just in this election cycle, we're going to continue to see this as we go forward.
Well, let me shoot this question to you before I go back to the callers, Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Robert Patillo, Attorney Patillo. Richard Mark says that Putin should keep his hands off my vote. 45 should enforce the law and protect my vote. It shouldn't matter if I vote for the Democrats. Police protection isn't determined by perceived party affiliation. And Vicki Wells agrees with Richard 100%. He's been emboldened, and we're watching these voter purges. how can we protect our votes? I mean, going into this process. I mean, what happens if you go to the primary and you go to vote in the primary and they say that you're not on the rolls? I mean, what are you supposed to do, CK?
Well, this is why we have election protection. Election protection is an effort primarily fueled by, or where the participants are primarily lawyers who are actually at the voting polls. But it's not just at the voting polls where they try to protect the vote. For instance, a lot of times people will come, if we talk about the voting polls first, they will go to the voting polls, they will go to vote, and they are turned away. They're told, well, your identification isn't correct, that your address is a problem with the address, your signature doesn't match. There are all kinds of issues that happen at the polling station. With the election protection efforts, there will be lawyers, trained lawyers, and some non-lawyers, volunteers that will be there, and their job really is to protect the vote. Because what we see with these aberrations, with these questions that are raised, they are raised along party lines. And that's the problem, where you might have some Republican voters come in, they have the same issues, they're allowed to vote. Democrats come in, these issues are pointed out, they're sent to another precinct, or they're put in the category of having to cast a provisional ballot, which is never counted. So if you have a robust election protection effort throughout the country, which is what is happening now, there are hundreds and thousands of volunteers, lawyers and non-lawyers that are being trained and that are going to be dispatched in the polling stations where we know this is happening on a regular basis. We saw here in Atlanta, when Stacey Abrams was running, unbelievable irregularities. We know why there were the irregularities, because it was an effort to stop her from winning. But despite all of those irregularities, she almost won. If we could just imagine what would have happened if we were able to, before people actually went to went to vote, if we were able to curtail some of those issues. So what do? Right now, you should find out if you have been purged from the system. Somebody in my office was purged from the system. After I've been in this space for a while, I said, everyone, just check to make sure you're registered to vote. Mm-hmm. And they just checked per chance, and they were purged from the system for no reason. They didn't move, they didn't change jobs, nothing changed other than them being purged from the system. This is happening in a systematic way, which is disproportionately affecting black and brown people and Democrats. So it's not something per chance that's happening, it's something by design. So what can people do? First, check and see if you're registered to vote right now. Not tomorrow, not the day of elections, but right now. That's one of the things you can do. Secondly, where there's a strong need, I can tell you, throughout the country, we've already lined up having robust numbers of lawyers. One of the things that the National Bar Association is doing, there's 65 or 66,000 African-American lawyers in this country. We're going to try to tap as many as we can to go into their neighborhoods, their localities, the voting precincts on that one day. It's one day of sacrifice to make sure that people's votes count. That you don't have, for example, as I saw here when Stacey Abrams was running at my own voting station in Brookhaven, it appeared that all the Latino voters, because there were no trained volunteers who spoke Spanish, as opposed to working with them, they just put them into the provisional ballot category. And so that is what's happening. So we need to make sure that we have robust efforts in the community, and it's a coordinated effort. This is not just a one-time thing. This is a coordinated effort that is tried and true, and that helped Barack Obama become elected.
Everybody, stay right here. Attorney Hoffler, I want you to stay right here before I go to break, because I want Attorney Robert Patillo and Dwight McKee and LaTosha Brown to weigh in on this, if you can, just on the other side of the break, because we've got a lot of things that are at play here. You need to make sure that you call 1-866-OUR-VOTE or go to vote.org and find out if you're still registered to vote. And you need to do that right up until Election Day, because they've been purging voters and they've accelerated the purges. There's something called cross-check, and I know you know about this, LaTosha Brown and Attorney Hoffler and Attorney Patillo and you, Dwight McKee. If you have the same name or a name that's very similar, you're going to get purged all across the country. Mm-hmm. And it affects it affects Asians, it affects African Americans, it affects the Latino population, because we tend to have the same last names. Mm-hmm. So It's been happening, everybody. You need to know that. But you also, at the same time, so much is being revealed to you. You need to dig in on the issues. And what we're seeing with these votes for the progressive candidates, for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, people are going past the labels. They want Medicare for all. They need some health care. They need some relief. They need some prosperity wages, wages that will enable them to be able to rent or buy a home in the same place where they live. There's a lot going on here, and you need to be involved. And call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Maybe you need to meet CK, Santita, and Latasha in South Carolina this weekend. How about that? More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes.
This is the
Mic going
Santita
hot.
Jackson Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Call us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. You can also send us a text on that number. Thank you, GWC Injury Lawyers, for that. And join us over on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. Please like and share, everybody. Deborah Denise Black, Ahmed, my sweetie. He's my guy from Keep Hope Alive. He's a great radio personality himself and producer. Really, really brilliant guy. He's joining us. Hey, love you, Ahmed, down in Atlanta. And I love all of you. Love you, love you. Deborah Douglas, brilliant journalist. You got to get her on sometime. So, and so many people. So call us at 773-763-9278. Meet us over on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show. Like and subscribe there, even if you bounce back to Facebook. Like and subscribe over there. And we're talking about Election 2020. We are months away from, we're in the midst of the election cycle, okay? And that was theory before, but now people are voting. And in every contest up to now, Bernie Sanders has won the popular vote. And he won the popular vote, and he won the organizing vote, if you will, at the Nevada caucuses this past weekend. And boy, was it a resounding victory in a fairly large field. He got 46.6% of the vote. And, hey, for her portion, Elizabeth Warren got 12%. So when you add them together, they almost got 60% of the vote. That's a lot. That's a lot. So, but the Democratic establishment is fretting, and we're talking with Latasha Brown of Black Voters Matter and Dwight McKee and Attorney C.K. Hoffler, a president-elect of the National Bar Association. Thank you for the correction. 66,000 black lawyers. It's the largest and oldest black bar association in the world. And Attorney Robert Patillo, brilliant civil rights lawyer. All of you. I am very, very excited about what South Carolina can bring. But I'm very excited about what happened in Nevada. 19% of that vote is Hispanic. 13% of it is black. 4% is Asian. I mean, it's beginning to look more like the United States when you get out there, as opposed to Iowa and New Hampshire. And Iowa and New Hampshire, that looked like America too, but not all of America. I mean, because there are some solid white parts of America, and America is still a segregated place in many respects, not in all. So, we're getting kind of a feeling for the flavor of the United States of America by looking at Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and coming up, South Carolina. 60+% of those voters in the Democratic primary in South Carolina are African American. What will that mean? Well, let me get to a couple of headlines before I get back to my callers and we talk about this brokered convention that they're talking about too. Tom Steyer has qualified for the South Carolina debate ahead of the primary. What will that mean? He is finishing in the polls, surprisingly, number 2. And his support is growing. Will he surprise us on Saturday? I don't know, but Dahlia and I will be down there to find out. We're going to check it out, are we not? It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Many people are saying that the reverse migration of African Americans, of black Americans, is pushing the state vote, reshaping Southern American politics. And we're going to see that on Super Tuesday, and we're going to see that on Saturday. So we will see how this goes. Has Sanders sent the Democratic Party establishment into panic mode? Well, that's what Politico is saying. They're saying in 30 years of politics, I've never seen this level of doom, one prominent centrist Democrat is reported to have said. And for his portion, according to this Newsweek article, and I did see the tweet myself, Bernie Sanders tweeted out, I've got news for the Republican establishment. I've got news for the Democratic establishment. They can't stop us. Wow. What does that mean? Nevada entrance polls show that 62% of Democratic caucus goers supported Medicare for All, which means that the culinary union, which did not endorse a candidate, but they did send a memo saying that, look, Bernie Sanders, you need to be aware of him and be wary, because his plan is going to take your health care insurance from you. The one, that plan that we fought for with the union. Well, guess what? They didn't care, because in 5 of the 6 hotels on the Strip, Bernie Sanders finished first. That's their union. Well, there's a break between rank and file, everybody. Rank and file and union leadership. what's going on. In the meantime, Mike Bloomberg is quietly plotting a brokered convention strategy, according to this Politico report. He is privately lobbying Democratic Party officials and donors allied with his moderate opponents to flip their allegiance to him and to block Bernie Sanders in the event of a brokered national convention. I wonder how that's going to work out. We will see. We will see. We will see. We will see. In the meantime, we're talking about Nevada right now, and we have a tremendous, tremendous panel of guests. We're going to bring up David Daly in a minute before some of my panelists have to leave me. But the Chicago Bulls were triumphant over the Washington Wizards, 126 to 117. The market took a bit of a hit on Friday. The Dow was down 227 points. The Nasdaq was down 174 points. S&P was down 35 points. We're expecting a high of 40 degrees today. You know, they're saying the market's taking hits because people are becoming more fearful of the coronavirus. It is challenging travel all around the world and the shipping of goods. So, I mean, it's popping up on all the continents. So, everybody, let's and B. Smith. Oh, wow. Latasha Brown and C.K. Hoffler and Robert Patillo and Dwight McKee. Barbara Smith, the great groundbreaking model and lifestyle guru and restaurateur, made her transition. Early onset Alzheimer's, everybody. We send our prayers to her husband and to her stepdaughter and to their family. She did a whole lot to really increase our life options, and I'm so grateful for all of the groundbreaking work that she did down through the years. Just 70 years old, but wow, Alzheimer's, it got her early, but boy, she made her mark in this life. Let us all take a lesson from that. Latasha Brown, Dwight McKee, C.K. Hoffler, attorney Robert Patillo. Let me get some thoughts from you all. You know, however long you can say, that would be great. I'm going to bring on David Daly in just a minute. Because I want to hear from him about this brokered convention. He said this could be a disaster for the Democrats. A disaster. Let me ask you, Latasha, could it be a disaster?
I certainly think that it's going to. We can look at it one or two ways. I think if we judge it by how we've seen conventions in the past, certainly I would describe it as, I think it's going to be disastrous. However, I think part of it could also be an opportunity that can open up a new era of how politics is happening in this country. I always talk about, share my Blockbuster video theory that, there was Blockbuster and Netflix, and Blockbuster and Netflix essentially delivered the same thing, but Blockbuster was really connected and just committed that they were going to have this brick and mortar way of being able to provide people could come by the store and get a movie and rent a movie and take it home with them. And they were everywhere, and they did well for so long. In some ways, I think that they had gotten to the point where they thought they were kind of invincible. They were leading in their field. And here comes Netflix, where people get the same service, which is getting access to movies, but from the comfort in their homes. And what we know is Blockbuster no longer exists, and Netflix is a driver. It's even changing the whole cable field. My point is, we have got to really be honest about where we are. The American political landscape has shifted. I don't think that it just started with this election cycle. It feels more critical and of nature because of what we're dealing with in the White House. But the truth of the matter is, both of the last two presidents were candidates that were not necessarily the party's candidates. When Obama entered the race, people have to remember, when Obama entered the race, he was not the Democratic establishment candidate. It was Clinton. And then ultimately, because he was a part of the establishment, ultimately, there was I would just call it, for the sake of this conversation this morning, a falling in line. But that was ultimately after he won the Iowa caucus, and he came back and he won the South Carolina in a big way. I think that's when he really solidified that he was going to be the nominee. But also, and then what we saw, so I think what we've got to really think about is we're looking at this political cycle, we're looking at the political landscape based on what we've seen in the past, when the truth of the matter is, and even Trump was not the Republican establishment. If people can remember, I think it was 22 or 23 candidates, Republican candidates that ran against him. The bottom line is the political paradigm that we know and we've been comfortable in knowing in America has forever been altered and shifted. And how people see the parties. Folks are clearly sending a message on both on the left side and the right side that they're looking for something different, that they want candidates that are not just inside of the political establishment. And so we got to pay attention to that. And I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see that at this convention. But I think we could see it as one thing. Yes, there may be some old ways that die. But the question is, what is the new thing that is emerging? What are the new opportunities and possibilities that are emerging? Because the other factor in this as well is that we're in the first time in our history that in recent modern day history, that baby boomers are not the largest voting electorate population. That now there's actually younger people, and the millennials, young folks, are now the new face of the electorate. And so while their vote turnout is different, it's not at the level of baby boomers, they now have the numbers. And I think we're going to, and what that means is that we're going to see a forever shift in the politics in this country. Now you've got the largest electoral base in this country are actually folks are outside of being baby boomers.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And people do need to pay attention. Because since 2008, we have been looking for alternatives to the Democratic and Republican establishments. We have been. And we've got to be real about that. Dwight McKee, what do you have to say before we go to these callers?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I have to say that I do see a broker convention, but again, I think that it's a misappropriation of the role of the Democratic National Committee. I think they're in a pursuit of their own power and their own relevance. I don't think it's about the people at all. I think it's about them being able to maintain their power base. And for them to do that, they need to put their candidates up. The people are clearly speaking in behalf of something new. And every campaign so far has demonstrated that. So the argument that Bernie does not have a base now, or Bernie can't win, or Bernie's out of step with the people, is a moot argument at this point. So it has to be about something else. And I think that something else is that they're at a crossroads now. My fear is that they will crash the party for the sake of trying to hold on to their own power base.
Well, we're going to see. We're going to see. I mean, Robert Patillo, do you have a response to that?
Well, I think the issue is the fragmentation of the party. That in years past, by the time you especially past Iowa and New Hampshire, you be down to your final three at most candidates, and so people will be making a very filtered choice. We will weeded out all the chaff by now. But the fact that we're going into South Carolina still with somebody like Tom Steyer in the race, somebody who has absolutely no chance of becoming the Democratic nominee, but who will influence by putting money in the streets of South Carolina, influence the outcome of those elections. We still have a Buttigieg and a Klobuchar in the race who don't have any clear path to victory, and who should be lining up behind one candidate or the other, so that we have the opportunity to make an educated choice for who the nominee is. I think that affects the outcome. When Bloomberg can just show up at the last minute with a bag of money and start buying black politicians left and right, not even on clearance. He's buying them retail. Show up for checks. You can pick up 4 or 5 black mayors in one road trip. That influences the outcome. So we're going to come, if we end up at a convention fight, I think that it tears the party apart the same way you saw Republicans be torn apart with the Tea Party revolution, where you have the party completely fractured to the point that the establishment was a thing of the past, where Jeb Bush, the most powerful Republican political name of the last quarter century, or the last half century indeed, had no power to fend off a game show host. It throws the moorings of our system into flux, and I don't think any of us have a full idea of what will come out on the other end. It could be something great. You can get a outside of the Beltway, outside of Washington figure like Barack Obama, or on the other hand, you can get a Donald Trump that comes out of it. So I don't think any of us can be certain about where things lie right now.
Well, I think it depends upon what we put in. What you put in really does govern what comes out, right? I mean, in the body politic, it really doesn't matter. Before I go to these callers, I think that does matter, and I think you all are bringing up some great points. CK, before I go to the callers, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I agree with everything that's been said thus far, especially what Robert Patillo just said. But I would say this: the Democrats have to get with the program. Not getting if Bernie Sanders is the front runner, remains the front runner, the Democrats need to align behind him. If he is, to get with the program. We may not like it. He says things that make us, socialism. We don't think he has a chance of winning because of that. But if the people say that, and people didn't believe Barack Obama could win. People certainly didn't believe that Donald Trump would win. But people got with the program, and they won. So if it's Bernie, and we know that this country needs change, all this outpouring from people means that they want change. If it's Bernie, if he's the front runner, as opposed to having all these fights and inner fights where we just look crazy, and then people will stay home and not vote, and then we are guaranteed that Donald Trump will be the next president. I think the Democrats need to get with the program. And fighting a force that is dominating can only go so far. And at some point, but we'll see what happens in South Carolina. I think South Carolina will dictate a lot. But all these other outlier people who have no chance and are just disruptors and splitting the vote, they need to get out of the way. Yeah.
I think you are definitive about that. What, Latasha?
The piece that I think that there's a critical part of this discussion that at some point we've got to have is how there's been a shift in the paradigm of the role of parties. People are really frustrated with parties, and I think that's on both ends. But technically, folks are really frustrated with political parties. There's nothing in the Constitution that says we the party. It says we the people. And so ultimately what we've seen, and I think is what was said earlier, what we've seen this concentrated power, this concentration of power at the top by a few folks who are leading the parties where America has essentially become a plutocracy, when folks are demanding democracy and they're demanding candidates and progressive candidates, in particular on the Democratic side, to really be able to say that our interests will be first, not the interests of the party. And the Democratic Party, if it is to survive, it is going to have to pay attention to that and respond to that accordingly.
We saw that when Reverend ran, and it has not stopped. It had been going on. His candidacy exposed that, and now it's being exposed again in yet an even bigger way. Let me go back to David from San Francisco. David, thank you so much for calling us back, sweetie. What's on your mind?
Well, thanks, Santita. Yeah, what I was trying to lean on was that in order for America to regain its composure, we need to get some solid wins. And so we need to demand, if these congressmen, senators, the president want to be reelected, they better get us something before Election Day. So, say, for example, Flint, Michigan. Trump has insulted not only Flint by never getting anything done, but he's also insulted Puerto Rico, the rest of the nation. Let's make sure that we get fresh, clean drinking fountains across America, and it's going to come from the Homeland Security budget. Because what's better Homeland Security than having clean drinking water? And if we need to get 1 billion trees planted quick, let's have that come out of the Homeland Security budget before Election Day, and let's have pick a project, across America that needs to be done. Let's make sure that the fountains, the mayor's races and the district attorney's races and the judge races, that these guys prove that they can actually get something done before Election Day and budget it. I've actually had some real good luck with the gardening shows lately. If the world needs to have 1 trillion trees planted quick, we need to have the Extension Service in on it. So all of those county agents all across America, and the territories too, that officially by decree from Trump, they can't believe in global warming. They know it's happening, but they're being given orders from Trump and his polluters that we can't believe in global warming. But if we demand that the congressmen get funding for the extension services before Election Day to do seed transfers, to do tree planting projects across every county in America, we got to give the orders here. Trump is our employee.
David, David has made a great point. And that means we're going to have to get our values together. We have to decide what is important to us. Let me go to, is it Mark from Bronzeville? How you doing, Mark? What's on your mind, sweetie?
I'm doing fine. I'm a little concerned because, with all due respect to your panel and the people who are positioning about the party and Bernie Sanders, I've been in the party since I was 18 years old. Actually, since I was 16. The first political campaign I worked on was when I was 10, and that was for George McGovern. And I think what people seem to forget, one of the last people that commented on your panel said something about, yes, you don't need a party, and you don't need a party, and you really need to. And the people, but as long as we have this party, you have to understand the structure. And I think you have to be aware of something. The issue with Bernie Sanders, for me, as somebody who's been in the party all this time, been out of the party, been a Democratic Socialist, towards the party, all of that, is that when he had a chance to build the progressive Democratic Socialist movement and to fund, he did not do it. And he didn't do it, he kept not doing it. The difference is why some people are concerned, why would I support Bloomberg, or why I would look at Bloomberg, is because I see his record. And every opportunity where he could have done something, yes, the stop and frisk is a legitimate issue, but also is legitimate is that he has invested against violence and gun violence. He has invested,
but he also invested in violence. Hold it, Mark. Wait. Stop, frisk, beat, and kill. It was an investment. He of course, he invested in violence. In violence. Okay, no, just go on because hold on, because many of these candidacies that we lift up, you had to run against the party. Every time Reverend has had to run against the party while he was trying to grow the party. And so people, unlike, no, but unlike you, a lot of us are not party insiders. I know I'm not. And so, but I'm voting with the party. I'm an independent Democrat, but I've been inside and while I got inside, I was part of the crew that held the door open for y'all to get deeper inside. So I understand inside party politics too. But what I'm saying to you is, you can't just slap against people who are pushing against these insider party politics. They're not working for anybody. Because you know what they're doing? The Democrats and the Republicans are in bed together, established, and they are holding up a corporatocracy that has us going broke, Mark. Your private insurance is not working for you. You got the last 30 seconds. You got it.
Capture this passion, because the situation is the party structure of how to choose a candidate has to look at not just that candidate and that campaign, but how it impacts all down the ballot. So there may be a situation where the person who may have a large number of votes will not get the nomination. That's the purpose of the superdelegates. But I will tell you this: when Barack Obama ran, Barack Obama did not have the majority of delegates. And because he did not have the superdelegates, it was the will of the party to say, we want this history to be made, and that's why they stood down.
Okay, no, I've got to run, but your point has been made. Now I'll let you finish it on the other side. Back in just a minute. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Mark, I'm going to ask you to stay over till the after show because I appreciate you making the argument for the establishment party. I do. I disagree with it, and I want us to talk more about it. But I wanted to bring up David Daley because he's written a tremendous piece on the possibility of a brokered convention. We're seeing a lot of evidence that, we're getting the sense that no one candidate is going to reach 1,991 delegates. And when asked last week during the debate if the candidates if they felt that the person who goes to the convention with the most delegates should be the nominee, only Bernie Sanders agreed with that. Now he looks like he's going to be the one, at least 3 contests in, if his momentum continues, and let alone if it continues to build, he might be the one with the most votes. He certainly has the enthusiasm, everybody. So David Daley, brokered convention, what is the upside? What is the downside?
Ooh, it's a hot mess, isn't it?
That's good. That's you're joining, of course, Latasha Brown of Black Voters Matter, Dwight McKee and attorney C.K. Hoffler, and Robert Patillo. I think he gave us the hashtag. What did you say? Hot mess? Okay, go.
Hashtag DNC hot mess. I mean, you have this system of primaries and caucuses that hands out delegates on a proportional basis. You have a really large field, so those delegates are going to be scattered amongst a bunch of people. But then you have a convention that requires a majority of delegates that are really hard to get over the course of this process with this big of a field. So the likelihood of somebody having 1991 in Milwaukee this summer is really hard to find. Now that sets up a big problem, right? Because on one hand, the person with the most votes ought to be the nominee, and it's really, really hard to take the nomination away from the person who has the most votes without splintering the party in a serious way. On the other hand, the party requires a majority winner for a reason. You want a nominee who has the support of a wide coalition of the party. You want a primary process that brings people together around a nominee. I mean, imagine for a moment that this is the scenario. Michael Bloomberg uses his money and launches himself into a commanding position on Super Tuesday, goes to the convention with 33% of the vote. Bernie Sanders collects 32% of the delegates. Warren's got 19%. Biden's got 16%. What do you do in that case? You know, Bloomberg's got the most delegates, but he doesn't have a majority. If you add up Sanders and Warren, they've got 51% under that scenario. Add up Bloomberg and Biden, they've got 49%. What is the fair thing to do? And so this question that the person with the most delegates at the convention has, you know, an absolute claim on the nomination, I think is wrong. On the other hand, it's really hard to deny that person the nomination in July without splintering the party in 1,001 different directions ahead of November. This is where we are headed.
What are we going to do? I mean, it sounds like a really super simple question, but you don't want to. Progressives, I know, are feeling that they're always put in the back of the line, but your energy is supposed to drive the front of the line. And we're told by the mainstream media that we should dismiss not just progressive candidates, but by extension, progressive concerns. What are we to do? How do you walk away from this? Walk away from Milwaukee, where the convention will be held, with people feeling good. I mean, because there's been talk, a lot of talk, down through the months, if not years, that if we had a brokered convention, that we would have to have a consensus candidate who would be someone who didn't run at all. How's that going to work?
Well, I mean, this is the problem with all of it.
Oh, stay right there. No, David Daly and Latasha. I mean, look, I open it up to you all because I'm trying to figure it out. Because I just think that it's a challenge. It's a wonderful opportunity because wherever there's crisis, to me, there's opportunity. Right? That's the Chinese symbol. They're both really the same thing. The crisis creates an opportunity for us to come up with a fair system because it used to be winner take all, right? So trying to get some proportional representation has been a real fight. You had to run for president twice in order to make that happen. Um, pushing these parties to behave in a democratic way, lowercase d, has been a very hard thing to do, and we're still in that fight. Uh, Latasha, you were jumping in.
Yeah, and that was my point. My point is, it's almost a phrase, the chickens have come home to roost. What has happened is ultimately there have been practices within both parties, but within the Democratic Party that are not democratic. That ultimately, if you look at what is happening with the super delegates, right, it's very similar to how we see the Electoral College in this country, right? That you can have one candidate like Hillary Clinton who had over 3 million more votes than Trump, yet Trump won the election. And so, although she had 3 million more people voted for her. And so you're seeing the same thing, these processes that are usually set up by people in power to protect their interests.
Well, hold on. Stay right there. Wait, Latasha. And you had 70,000 plus votes in Michigan that were not counted. But when Jill Stein said, let's count the votes, the Democratic establishment pushed up against her. I said, wait. Why don't you count the votes? This is her margin of victory. Are you kidding me? What? So how am I supposed to support that? I mean, and when we get to the after show, I'm gonna talk with Mark about that because I don't know. In 2004, John Conyers said, "Look, we got to go to Ohio because these votes are not looking right, and we could lose. We could win the election on this." The Democratic Party establishment pushed against him and pushed him out the House. Thank you very much. Are you kidding me? 2000. We're trying to count the votes. There's a Democratic Party establishment that would not count these votes. That I'm just. I'm without words here.
Yes, no. I think we've got to be really adamant around. We've got to demand democracy. That's just the truth of the matter. We have allowed these political parties, really is a left side and a right side of one party. We've got a party that literally you've got folks who it's amazing to me the fact that we're in this conversation around health care and who gets health care. How is it that every single member of Congress, who are the majority of them are millionaires and more, have the best health care in this country, yet they have not made a commitment to health care to folks or even believe and support that everyday regular folks, working folks in this country get health care. They have concentrated the benefits and the power for themselves. Even most recently in the last year, where the Democratic Party actually created a rule that if you are a new vendor, if there are new vendors, new firms that are working for candidates that are not the incumbent candidates, that they will blackball them from the list. So essentially what you're saying is that if there are any new firms that are supporting emerging Democrats outside of the establishment, then they're going to be cut off from the party. There are some fundamental structural issues that we have in this political system that is actually being facilitated by the political parties, including the Democrats, around their lack of commitment to democracy. That ultimately what they want, and I think part of what we see even some of this frenzy and chaos, I really question if it's really frenzy and chaos in the community. What it looks like is there's more frenzy and chaos within the party itself.
Say that. Because, wait a minute, because the community's coming together and they're voting the way they're going to vote, right?
It's come together and voting the way they're going to vote. What we're hearing, this anxiety and all of this chaos, is really coming from the Democratic Party because they cannot control what is happening. So what is happening is that throwing things off, is shifting the paradigm. What you see even with young voters, most young voters that I talk to identify themselves as being independent voters, including those voters that will vote for a Democrat. People are becoming more sophisticated in terms of what is happening on the ground and looking at how the political parties have exploited them and exploited their support. And I think ultimately, all of this anxiety, where's the anxiety coming from? The anxiety is coming from those that have been in positions of power, that have been able just to tell the rest of us what one candidate for us to vote for, and everybody gets online to go for that one candidate, two at best, but it's usually one candidate the establishment is firmly behind, that they convince the rest of us to vote. I think we've got to really think about this thing, that here it is, we're saying that, oh, we haven't had a choice. That's not true. This has been the most diverse field that the Democrats have ever had. We've had people of color. We had we had a gay candidate. We've had a progressive candidate. We've got conservative candidates. The bottom line is, what is wrong with choices? Why are we looking at the burden of choices? The reason why the Democratic establishment is continuing to push this issue around the choice piece is because they're not used to folks having this variety of choices and literally not having a candidate that they tell us is a candidate for us to support. And so what we see is, instead of us celebrating the diversity of the field, instead of us celebrating the diversity of the ideologies of the candidates, we're seeing that as a burden, because the Democratic Party could not get itself together where it had the candidate that literally was the most attractive candidate that they want in office. That is the problem. That's where the chaos is coming from. The anxiety is coming more and being driven from the party establishment sphere more than it is from the fear of people on the ground.
David, Hot Mess Daily. David, go on and say, and his book Unrigged is about to come out, everybody.
1,000-foot level, because I think that's exactly the right framing of this argument. What we have is a fundamental mismatch between the size of the field, the amount of choices we deserve and ought to have, and a system in which we elect these people. So we've talked about how a winner-takes-all is fundamentally unfair, right? I mean, the electoral college system is a winner-take-all system. If you win the state, you get all of the electoral votes, even if you win the state by one vote. And that is how you can have an outcome like we had in 2016, in which somebody can lose the popular vote and win the electoral college. What we have in the Democratic Party right now is this proportional system of delegates that you have to somehow reach a majority to win the nomination. So there is a mismatch between the kinds of contests you have and the result you need at the end. What we have to do is create a different kind of system that actually allows us to use our voice and to cast a reasoned, smart vote with a big field. This is the problem the Republicans had in 2016, right? You had Donald Trump with 35-40% of the vote, and then you had everybody else with 65% of the vote. And they couldn't agree on what to do, and you ended up having Trump win a plurality and take the nomination. If Democrats chose if both parties used ranked choice voting, for example, to choose their nominee, and if we were able to go to the polls and say, you know, I like Sanders first, Warren second, Bloomberg third, Buttigieg fourth, Klobuchar fifth, and if our vote worked as if it was an instant runoff, and the person at the bottom is cut out, and then our second choice votes come into play. It's an instant runoff. It forces you to get 50% plus one, but it gives you a system in which you can actually get to 50%, and it forces people to sort of build a coalition. This is what, David Leonhardt in the New York Times this morning is challenging Bernie Sanders to find a way to kind of grow his coalition. This is what you do if you have to grow a coalition. You go out and you talk to people and try to get second place votes. Instead of Sanders and Warren people being at each other's throats, they'd be finding a way to kind of come together. We'd be building some unity right now instead of having all of this chaos.
Well, chaos or community? Where do we go from here? Let me go to Aaron really. Let me bring up. I want to bring up Aaron really quickly, because Aaron, you've been waiting for a minute, and I want to thank you so much for being so patient. Aaron, what's on your mind?
Well, good morning, everybody. How you doing?
What's on your mind, Aaron? It's great hearing your voice.
Yeah, I think a brokered convention that goes against the will of the people would be a disaster. That's the first thing that I got to say. And the second is that we, as a nation, need to be very suspicious about what we read and believe on social media or here in the media. And that's about it.
You have said a whole lot. Thank you very much. Let me go to Noel. How are you doing, Noel?
Yes, good morning. How you doing?
Great. What's on your mind, Noel? Thank you so much.
All right. Yes. I keep hearing the Democratic establishment is in panic mode, where it should be, because they haven't learned their lesson yet. Both the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment, they have not listened to the people. That's the problem right there. Okay? If you take the election from 2000, Al Gore, and you take 2016, Hillary Clinton, both of those were Democratic establishment. How did that turn out? Now, take the opposite, 2008, Obama, and take 2016. What's the name? Trump. Those were both sometime with some sort of outsider of the establishment. There's not going to be a Brooklyn convention because the Democratic establishment candidate, which is Biden, how are you doing right now? In 2016, they did not listen. Clinton, she lost, Michigan to Bernie Sanders.
Well, that was but she didn't. We don't know what happened in the general election, Aaron. Noel, because they would not count all of her votes. She won by 3 million votes. Even with I'm so tired of her. Okay.
I'm not about Clinton and what's his name? Trump. I'm talking about doing the Democratic primary.
Mm-hmm.
Because she wasn't listening. When they told her to go to Michigan and campaign, she did not. And so she lost the Democratic primary to Bernie Sanders, where she needs to win the Midwest. Like Michigan, Wisconsin, and places like Pennsylvania. If the state of Pennsylvania, they're like 1 million more registered Democrats than Republicans. You need to get your people out. You need to get the people out. And no one was excited about coming out. In 2008, people were excited.
Well, and you know what, and Noel, you're absolutely right, because it becomes a challenge, and I'm going to go through get some closing thoughts from everybody on the panel here, because what they're doing is when you continue to push back against Bernie, when you go on the news and you hear all that Bernie is not, all that Elizabeth Warren is not, and why he won't work, why she won't work, while their policies, we reward greed, other people's greed, but my need is a problem for everybody. Robert Patillo, your closing thoughts. What is our takeaway from all of this? Because when these people are slapping against these progressives, they feel insulted. I think we have to be mindful of that. That's why I try to be very careful about talking about folks' candidates, because you project onto this candidate what it is what you need them to be, who you need them to be, and we all do that. Robert Patillo, your closing thoughts. Well, let me go to you, CK. CK, your closing thoughts.
My closing thoughts are, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse in some respects, and that's such a politically incorrect statement to make, but I feel that the party, as people have said before, and I said before, is a hot mess. We need to embrace whatever the people say they want, because that is fundamentally what we should be about. And Bernie Sanders, for some reason, and I'm not saying that I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, that's not my point. Mm-hmm. Bernie Sanders is resonating with our voters. We cannot ignore someone who has a resounding lead at this point. But let's see what happens in South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens in South Carolina. But I just hope that we come out of South Carolina not in denial and not trying to destroy the candidate who is clearly the front runner if he prevails the way I believe he will. And again, I'm not speaking from a place of being a Bernie Sanders supporter. I'm just looking at the party and the will of the people, because that's what this should be about, the will of the people.
That's right. I mean, this is really about respecting the will of the people. Let me go to you, David Daly.
I think it's difficult to see what the will of the people is if we get to a convention with 34% for Sanders and 30% for Bloomberg and 26% for Biden and 22% for Warren. A plurality nominee is not what the rules require for a reason. We want to unify behind somebody, and when you have somebody, the will of the people needs to be respected, absolutely. We need a better way of determining what the will of the people really is, and I think that this plurality system is not great for that, and a system that gives voters more power, the ability to rank their choices, is a stronger way of determining the will of the people, especially in these crowded, large fields that are only getting bigger every 4 years.
Latasha Brown?
I just agree with the last two comments. I do think ranked choice voting, having some kind of ranked choice voting at the convention, can really determine who has the majority of the support. But I also want to raise, and we haven't really talked about it, but it's how race is a factor. That is essentially what has happened. You know, as a black Southerner, I have always had to go with candidates that, not always, but the majority of the time I've been able to ask to go with candidates that did not center my issues as a black woman in the South. I had to go with a candidate that was, the candidate that was most electable, or the candidate that could pull the party together. What I think we're seeing now is we're seeing the shift of the electorate, that you're seeing a more diverse electorate. You're seeing young people who are demanding that they are not loyal to the party, that ultimately they want something different and they're going to demand something different, and they're not just going to fall in line with what the white party, the Democratic Party establishment says that we should get behind. That's what we saw happen in Biden. That was a candidate, this was the great white hope that was supposed to pull everybody together and was going to represent the party and the majority of the base of the party, who have for years been ignored. And I can go back to Reverend's campaign. When Reverend ran, the kind of excitement, the kind of energy, I really think that had he won and gotten the Democratic nomination, we would have seen the kind of excitement and energy that could have transformed America. But the party stopped that kind of momentum. And so I think it's really important that we're back at this point again, and I don't think it's going to go away. We're at this point again, and one, aside from I do think that there needs to be a ranked choice, secondly, there is something happening. The political paradigm in America has shifted, and we've got to be prepared to respond to it, to go forward in the future.
Dwight, I got a minute, and it's yours.
I totally agree with most of the panel. Is that I think that we're at a crossroads in democratic politics. I think that the people are speaking. The question is, are their voices going to be heard? It is the role that I've seen of the DNC is to maintain control of the party, and generally is at the expense of the goals for more coalition-based politics. They be looking more for concentration-based politics, and they use the superdelegates as the margin of the leverage in their own behalf, as opposed to the will of the people. So I think that you really run the risk, if they don't really listen to what the people have to say, of a bloodbath in Milwaukee this year.
Well, everybody, stay with me for the after show. Those of my guests who can stay, we're going to talk for a few more minutes about this because we want to avoid that. But you know what? You have to figure out who's driving the process. Is it the party or the people? It should be the people driving this process. And the people are speaking. Will the party listen? Will this nominee be democratically elected? Or will this candidate be selected? That's not democracy at all. Think about that, everybody. And of course, stay right here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. Like and share, everybody. And on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show. Like and subscribe. Stay right here. We're going to be talking about this brokered convention and how we can continue to really get our politics together. And you know, before you get who you want, got to get what you need. And the people are telling you what they need. They're telling all the parties. Now, will the parties listen? Hey, people keep on voting. When you do that, they will have no choice. More of the Santita Jackson Show on the other side. I love everybody. On WCPT, I'll see you tomorrow. God bless. Hey, everybody, how you doing? Hey, we've got David Daly with us. Everybody, you've got to go on Amazon, please, and pre-order his book, Unrigged. We are going to push and make sure that this is a bestseller. Latasha Brown has been a Harvard fellow, and she's going to be going back really after this campaign cycle. Latasha, everybody on this panel today, you should have up at Harvard, and you should start with David Daly, because he wrote the book Rat Effed, and he told the true story of the secret plan to steal our elections, our democracy. And now his new book that's coming out is Unrigged, and we need to make this book a bestseller. And
yes, and we need to have him. I actually reached out to him last semester. We couldn't, the schedule, I couldn't pull it off. I will definitely have him there. We will definitely have him there, because I do think that his work is extraordinary.
It's extraordinary, and it's so necessary. And you know what? Let me go back to you, Mark. I promised you I'd have you here on the other side. You were saying, I can appreciate your position, whether I agree with it or not. And you were saying something that I found intriguing as we were, as I had to go to the other callers. You were saying that it almost sounded as if the Democrats did Barack a favor, or did President Obama a favor, or did us a favor by allowing Barack Obama to win. I want you to clarify that.
Obama, he had majority of delegates, yes, but he did not have majority
of the votes. Mark, are you walking around outside? I just need you to get into a quiet place so that we can hear you, and then we will let you go. Okay?
Okay, so what I'm saying is that when we got to the convention, while he had more delegates than Hillary, but he did not have the majority of the delegate vote because he did not have the superdelegates. And as a matter of fact, the superdelegates were, if the superdelegate structure had worked, they would have not made Obama the nominee because he didn't have the vote. But the pressure that was applied, again, from the, accurately so, from the grassroots, kept saying, let this man do this. Let's do this. Let's do this and let it go.
But can I give it some? Can I give what you're saying some context? Because of course, a generation before it was Reverend Jackson's candidacies, his running for the presidency, that changed all of that. There are only two black people in the history of, I think it was in the history of Democratic and maybe presidential politics, who've had their names put into nomination at the Democratic Convention. And first that was Jesse Jackson, and then it was Barack Obama. I was shocked when I was reading the crawl, when the voting was happening, that he was only the second black. There are only two African Americans in the history of Democratic politics that have had their names placed into nomination at the convention. The first was Jesse Jackson. The second, no, I'm just telling you what. Listen, I'm telling you what the crawl said because we were shocked. We were shocked. Shirley Chisholm ran. You're talking about getting people into nomination. That's a different deal, Mark. And what I'm saying to you is, even though he did not win the popular vote in 2008, Hillary Clinton won more votes. But what he did do was win more votes in more places. Now, the reason he was able to accrue more delegates and the reason the formula for him works was because of the Jackson rules. Because it used to be a winner-take-all system. And what Reverend pushed for was proportionality, so that you could, if you meet the 15% threshold, because they had it at 20, we wanted it lower, at least lower it to 10. Then the compromise was 15%. If you meet that threshold, then your vote should reflect your delegate count should reflect the votes that you've got. Okay. So I'm just saying to you, I understand the superdelegates and all of that because they put superdelegates in place also to thwart the emerging Jesse Jackson candidacies, because he so shocked them. No, let me just say that because I was there too, and I was sitting in on the negotiations. And what I try to do is share with you what I heard when I was in the room and what I saw when I was in the room. Because one thing that Reverend and Mrs. Jackson did do, well, they didn't just bring their children. They brought Ray Lewis. They brought a lot of young people into the room so we could see how this worked. And I would be negligent, no, let me say this, I would be negligent with all of the history that I carry and all that I've witnessed if I did not say, hey, Mark, let me get this right, okay? That's why I jump in with you. Not to jump in on you, but just to tweak it and correct it.
Well, I understand, but let me just add this little caveat to it. It was, without a doubt, the Jackson campaign made a significant, it changed the process.
Honey, it made it possible. It made it possible. No, not significant. No, because I'm not talking about my father here. I'm talking about someone who went out here. No, wait. Let me establish this because he would never say it. I'm talking about the person who made all of this possible, building on taking the baton from Dr. King and making this possible. It wasn't significant. You didn't have black folks. Let me say this. You didn't have black people covering presidential campaigns until the Jackson campaigns. You didn't have black people in a meaningful way on the Democratic National Committee until the Jackson campaigns. Because part of that, this is why when we're talking about the business of politics, well, we didn't know was the business of politics. We didn't know about vending, about contracts that were awarded by the party to their friends that enriched their friends. And Reverend broke all of that. And now I want other people who don't understand what you know because you're a party insider. I want other people to understand what I came to understand and what you came to know. Okay?
I hear you. I'm just going to add one little caveat to that. 4 years before, in 1980, there was a black man that was nominated on the convention floor by the National Convention to be vice president against Walter Mondale.
We're saying president, honey. President. That's no caveat. But that's not a caveat. We're talking about nominating for president.
The impact of the party was because when they put his name into nomination, and then he spoke, and then they began to take votes, they stopped the vote, and then they switched it up. They switched up at the time to then have a motion of acclamation for Walter Mondale. What I'm saying is, my point is that we are in great, acknowledgement that if it had that what Jesse Jackson did was not only, and the Jesse Jackson campaign did not only just push the civil rights movement, it pushed this party's wall.
It pushed American politics, as you had black Republicans for Jesse Jackson. I don't want to get caught up in this. Let's not get caught in the weeds. Mark, stop. We're not going to get caught in the weeds. We do that a lot. Because you had black Republicans, stop, Mark, because I'm giving you the history, because I was right there. I mean, you had Armstrong Williams became prominent in the Republican Party because he headed up young black Republicans for Jesse Jackson. You had it changed American politics, and then it ended up changing world politics. But we're talking about a brokered convention here that we could have. So I know, but Mark, don't get caught off in the weeds, baby. Stay right on the point. You do it Mark, stop it. You do it all the time. Mark, get to that point.
Back to the convention, this is where we're at. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. I mean, once the delegates have been voted on and whatever process here before the convention, then the real fight begins as to the core of what the party is about, which is the battle of credentials, which is the battle of platform, which is all of that stuff. And all I am saying, this is what my apprehension about Bernie Sanders is that even before this, when there was opportunity for him to have influenced that, he didn't do it. He didn't do it 4 years ago, and he didn't do it 8 years ago, and he didn't do it 12 years ago, and he hasn't done it. And so the concern that somebody, I'm not a corporate promoter or supporter of the party. I'm the least to do that. I am a Democratic Socialist. I was at the founding convention of the Democratic Socialists of America. I am not that person. But what I am passionate about these issues and how they're addressed, because if we have a platform, we can hold that up to whoever the candidate for the party is. And that's what this is about. This is about finding the best candidate so that down the line we can win with this platform and win with these ideas and all that type of stuff. So it's not just a popular vote. You need to find something. It's like Attorney Hoffler. Let me make a point. Let me try this point, because maybe you can see.
I want. From what you've heard, I would like to have Latasha and Chaparral. I want to have the people respond to you, because we're already 12 minutes in, Mark. Okay, so all right, so you hush. No. I know, honey. I'm not gonna forget about tonight. I'll be there, obviously. But Latasha, what are you hearing?
I just hear. I think what's concerning is that I hear, and I actually think he makes some good points. The challenge is he's holding a standard of one candidate that he hasn't held at the others, because it's interesting. So to say what Bernie should have done and he hasn't been able to do in the last 8 years, Biden comes out of nowhere, was a vice president who was is a part of the Democratic establishment and has not built any kind of infrastructure or base on the ground. And I can go on and on and on. And so I think that in some ways that while his comments appear to be, I'm being neutral, they're not neutral. It puts another burden on Bernie than the other candidates, and why that so deeply resonates with me is that's what I think people put on black voters. Time and time again, black people are asked to sacrifice our issues in our best interest to go with what is going to be in the best interest of the party, and that we should go with the candidate. That's really, in some ways, that's almost the same argument that used against Reverend Jackson, that ultimately he was not going to be able to win, and so therefore they need to go with a candidate that could actually, quite frankly, be able to attract the white vote. And so I think what we've got to do is we've got to really shift again our understanding of who is making up the electorate. We are entering an era that the majority of people in this country will be non-white Americans, right? And so ultimately, when we're talking about what is the future of America and a future of American politics, there is going to be a paradigm shift. And we've got to get with the program and what that means. And so we also have to check how our analysis is rooted in this party structure and what the party is. It is obvious. In the last 20 years, it is obvious that the paradigm of the party and the position and the influence of the party has diminished greatly. And I don't think that that's going to come back anytime soon. I mean, I think that they certainly have a tremendous amount of power because they control the legislative branches. But I'm saying that there is a growing divide between the leadership of the party and the people who make the base of the party. And there is no denying that. And there's no need of us just saying, well, we're going to blame the candidates when it's a larger fundamental structural problem that we're dealing with and we're going to deal with, and it's going to be a shift in how people see power, and I can guarantee you it's going to be a shift in the type of candidates that we see going into the future.
David Daly, before I come to you, David Daly, why don't you speak to that? Because, I mean, the culinary union out in Vegas, it did not matter what they said about Bernie Sanders. 62% of those who went to the caucuses said healthcare is our chief concern, and we want Medicare for all. They didn't even listen to the leadership of their union.
I think that's exactly right, and I think Latasha's got it exactly right. So the only thing I would add is that I take all of her analysis as being exactly spot on, and I would say that being as that's the case, we have to change the rules. There's this party structure that is governing our changing politics. And the party structure and the rules are the way that the old-timers and the establishment hold on to control. And this is why we've got to find a way to change the rules in such a way as to allow our politics to actually reflect the will of the people and the nature of a changing American electorate that's growing more diverse and less white in every election. What you've seen in the Republican Party has been this decade-long effort to change the rules through gerrymandering, through voter suppression, through voter purges, through, in 2021, what they're going to do is use citizen voting age population in many states instead of total population to draw state legislative districts. So it's this constant effort to change the rules to keep themselves in charge. And if we, on the other side, who want to take power, we have to understand that perhaps the key fight in American politics is going to become over the rules of the game. And we've got to be in that battle as well.
Absolutely, because I can tell you from my experience with the Jackson candidacies, it was about changing the rules and making these rules more fair as it was about anything else, because you started running, and that's when you began to see something very, very different. Shapiro? Yeah, absolutely. It's the rules. It's the rules.
Made by the people in charge to keep them in charge.
You're right, to keep them
room, and then we have to change the rules.
Shapiro, what's on your mind? I hear that baby in the background. Mwah.
But hey, I had to call because I feel like it's so important that the Democratic leadership begins to listen to the people. You know, on Twitter, it's a movement called "Not Me, Us." It's because it's not about one single person. It is about us. what do we want as a democracy? What do we want to see our Democratic Party stand for? And what they're standing for, they're telling me to hold my nose and vote for who, just vote blue no matter who. I'm saying hell no to that, because I'm not doing it. I don't care what they do.
Right.
I will write in a candidate that I want that is going to vote my interest. And what's appalling to me is that the liberal media is all on board with bashing Bernie. Bernie is my second choice. My first choice is Elizabeth Warren. But I will support any of these populist candidates because I believe that that progressive agenda is what we need. We need a huge shift change in America right now. And so my thing is that what's going to happen if you continue to see all the bashing of Bernie because he's winning, you're going to see people turned off, just like they're going to stay home. And right now, I don't even see the Democratic Party even getting a massive get out the vote campaign. You know, we already know that politics right now, we know that the Russians are already infiltrating the election. So the only way to combat that is by massive voter registration. And you have Tom Perez sitting on TV during the Nevada caucuses saying that, well, he doesn't believe you have to have 1991 in order to get the nomination straight out, or else it's going to go to the superdelegates and let them decide. You know what, Tom Perez? You don't want the Democratic Party to win. While he was sitting up there, I wanted to smack him in the face, but Lord knows I couldn't do that to the TV. But if it was possible, I would have muffed him or something, because he's not understanding how the electorate is actually feeling. We are tired of the status quo. I keep telling people, no, this is not going to go this way this time. What's the difference between a Bloomberg and a Trump? Not a darn thing. The policies are the same, and the Democratic Party is not realizing that we are actually reading these policies, we are seeing what these people are saying, and we're not going to fall for the okie doke. We're not going to do it. And so they have to realize that they have to come correct, and they have to begin to also put money in black media, put money in the black neighborhoods. One things I do like is the SIRE campaign is actually doing African American outreach. I think that Bernie and Elizabeth need to do more in that area. And I think that they need to take lessons from the Jackson campaign and how he registered so many millions of people. And this is how he was able to get those delegates. And so my thing is that if we want to win and beat Trump, just telling me that these people are not Trump is not enough for me. It's not going to satisfy me to get my vote. They have to come correct, and they have to come to a point that to say, it's not me, it's us.
All right. Dwight McKee, no, hold on. Let me jump back to Dwight, because I haven't heard from him in a minute. Dwight, what are you hearing?
Pretty much the same thing is that...
Dwight, hold on 1 second. Chaparral, can you put us on mute for a hot second? Huh? Oh, okay. Whoever's riding in a car or walking outside, if you could put us on mute for a hot second. Don't leave, just put us on mute so we can hear everybody clearly, okay? Thanks. Dwight?
Yeah, we have to understand that politics is big business, and that there is the vested interest of the DNC to maintain control and power, because to maintain control and power is to maintain control of the contracts and the salaries and some local power bases and some of the platform. And so it's in their interest to lock themselves in and lock everybody else out. Part of our approach to democracy has to be first to democratize the Democrats. That they have a situation now where, because again of the superdelegates, that they can leverage their interests even against the interests of the people. And so I just want us to be vigilant and to really understand the process and what we're really kind of up against. One of the things I said early in is that I was looking for, when the process first started, that they'd be looking for a way to neutralize Bernie. It would become an anybody but a Bernie campaign. And we have to make sure, whether it's Bernie or whoever, the people's will be expressed and not the will of the party.
And I thank you for that, because that's my only point. I've seen this before. And, and as I shared with you, Mark, as I shared with others, you took umbrage with it. Bernie did come out of the Jackson campaign, because Bernie Sanders was a mayor of a small town, biggest town in Vermont, but it was a small town. And by running our campaigns, you get a voter list. You get statewide exposure. And it was behind those campaigns that he went to the lower house of Congress and then on to the U.S. Senate. And he gives Reverend credit for all of that. And so I'm just saying, it is what it is. We all build. It's a race where the baton is passed from one person to the next, one generation to the next. But I maintain that that these parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, because the Republicans are doing the same thing. They are stopping primaries. Dwight and David and Latasha, all over the country, because they're not even built. Governor Weld has been trying to run, and he can't even run in a primary because the Republicans are saying we don't have a need for a primary. I'm like, a what? Who does this? And this is why George Washington was lamenting this two-party system and the party system. He said we're going to have tyranny. Our first president said that. He said, this is going to be a problem, you guys.
There are primaries, right? I mean, it's absurd that the party is able to just cancel these primaries and cancel the vote. That's essentially what they're doing. They're saying, well, we don't want to hear whether there's opposition to the Donald Trump, so we're just going to cancel these primaries. And state after state, it is atrocious, and we ought to be talking about it. It's kind of staggering to me that you could have in 2020 canceled elections, and it's not a huge issue with people out in the streets. I mean, this is how tyranny.
The media isn't covering it.
No, I mean, but it's not. I mean, and David and Mark, David, first you. The fact that the media won't cover this in a meaningful way, the fact that Democrats and Republicans, we should be up in arms about that. That a party can cancel an election? I mean, who does that?
It's crazy. I mean, what we're living in this moment is absurd. And we would never accept any of this in another country. I mean, sometimes I think it's really interesting to imagine how this would be covered by our media if it was happening someplace else. Right? I mean, it would be...
Absolutely.
Here is the stuff of banana.
They don't understand it.
No. They do understand it. Dwight, were you about to say something?
No.
I'm just saying, they understand this. Because the media are in on it, Mark. They're not even journalists anymore. They are in on it. They are preserving, they are here to help preserve this order. And it's a terrible thing. I'm sorry, Latasha? Huh? Well, first you...
True. Let me say, I recently did a article, a couple of articles, but there was an article in several major publications. And the only thing in common with the articles, which was so interesting, because I'm not necessarily right now, I haven't publicly shared what candidate I'm supporting, but my top candidate is not Bernie at this point. Mm-hmm. However, I mentioned Bernie's campaign in relationship to some of the momentum and some of the organizing I was seeing on the ground, and I just mentioned it. The only thing that was taken out of 3 different articles that I've done, right, was the reference to Bernie. That's what made me start thinking, like, wait a minute, there is something going on here. And it was interesting, even in one of the references, quite frankly, one of them was the New York Times, in one of the references,
I wasn't even talking about Bernie. I was talking about another candidate. I was talking about Bloomberg, and there was a lot of information, and I made a reference. My point is there is a concerted effort to marginalize Bernie, which actually started to make Bernie look a little more attractive to me. Yeah. Because now I'm like, why is there such this concerted effort to marginalize this particular candidate, where they're going through extreme measures? As someone who's a political pundit on shows, I'm often called on shows, I am sitting here witnessing how Bernie's campaign, Bernie's momentum is all being marginalized. I was in one discussion where we were talking about Biden. Biden came in fifth. He was fourth. He came in fourth, and he was still being touted as what is possible, and he was going to be the candidate with momentum. So there's no way that we can actually, any person who is reasonably prudent and is honest can say that we are not witnessing how the media, particularly the national and the mass media, is marginalized as a part of the alignment with the establishment, where they are pushing particular narratives to try to help candidates. I've said that from the beginning, even when I called it the B-boards. At the onset of when we had all these candidates, it was Beto and Biden and all of the white male candidates. For some reason, we're seeing Buttigieg had more momentum, and anytime they did well or there was a bump in the polls, it was touted, could this be the next president? But when you saw the momentum of candidates like Kamala Harris, when she first jumped out, there was a lot of momentum around her candidacy. When you saw momentum, when there was a bump up of Elizabeth Warren, when she first came out with a plan, and there were people about her plans and excited, I did not see the same headlines, nor when I went on talk shows was the questions that came to me framed the same way they had been framed when it talked about the white Democratic candidate. So there is a problem here that is rooted in white supremacy and white control, and rooted in patriarchy, that the women candidates have not received the same kind of framework in the media as we've seen the others, and the same kind of description of their campaigns or the momentum. So there's something fundamentally wrong, and with the media has been very complicit, and I think in the marginalization of not just in Bernie Sanders' campaign, but in some of the other candidates that are not seen as the top choices for the Democratic establishment. We just got to be honest with that, Mark.
And for those who remember the rumors about the emails, Hillary's emails, where she got rid of them because many of them was a conspiracy to sabotage Bernie, and that Donna Brazile got fired because she was feeding information to Hillary. She was the co-chair of the DNC, and the sister down in Florida who was the chairman of the DNC. I forgot her name.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Wasserman Schultz, yeah.
Yes, she got fired for the same reason. She had an obvious bias against for Hillary and against anybody who was not Hillary. And so this objectivity in the party itself, this presumption of objectivity, is truly an illusion. The party is not objective. The party is subjective in their own interests. And I think that we would be...
No, Dwight, please continue.
I think we would be irresponsible not to process that in our approach to this convention and our approach to the election, not to process that and be prepared to have to deal with it and maintain the integrity and the dignity of the party in behalf of the people.
God bless you. God bless you, Mark. But and that is why, all of these lessons from down through the years. I mean, hey, I don't want to just go back to 1984 and 1988, but there was so much that we learned there that is still applicable here. And so I just want to get the history right. I want to get the stories right so we can get this all right. You know what I mean? Because what I see the people pushing up against fundamental unfairness. And they're seeing it. That's why President Trump is able to talk about fake news, because a lot of the news is fake. But he's coming at it from the wrong direction. But you have to understand, he's a marketer. He studied the cultural landscape. He understands this. He studied all of this, and he saw that most Americans are disenchanted with the mainstream media, on the right and the left, period. And he ran in that direction. Most of us are mistrustful of the government, and he ran in that direction. You have to understand how he is marketing and what he is doing. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying this is what he's doing, and it's working because of what we're seeing on the right and the left. Remember, people bounced between Bernie and Trump. They just wanted someone who was going to do something that was going to make their lives better. That's what it was not about love of either of these guys. Because these candidates, they are really proxies for your hopes, dreams, and ambitions. That's what they do. They speak to that. That's it. That's it. But wait a minute. I got Tim in here who's not been able to get a word in edgewise. And Tim, if you tell me how people are going to beat you up because you're conservative, I'm going to hang up on you right now.
Nope, I was actually going to talk about AOC. This is how we should select our people that represent our politicians. AOC was asked to run for office. She didn't know anything about office. Something about her was right and appealing to some groups that came to her and said, we would like you to represent what we believe in our district. And that is revolutionary. Not in a bad way revolutionary, but that is the way we should select our leaders. We should go to them and say, we see in you what is in us. And you're absolutely correct about the president being a marketer, because he spoke to, this is what you want, and this is what I will do for you. And then when you look at Bloomberg is all about what I will do and what I will accomplish. And that's why I think if the two were head to head, you look at somebody who thinks that they're going to push themselves into leadership, and another person who the entire time, and I don't agree with this president at all. But when you look at AOC, when you look at Trump, they speak for the people who want them elected, and it's obviously they're both in opposite directions, but they're exciting to the democratic process in America. I don't see any difference in America 40 years from now than today. It'll still be people that want to have a democracy, have a voice. I don't care the depth of melanin in their skin or their cultural background. When you're an American, you want American freedom, and this is what excites me about the future. I'm not pessimistic about the future of politics. I'm not pessimistic about the changing demographics, whatever the heck that means, because people are people. At the end of the day, people are people. They want a good life, they want good food, they want a future, they want security, and that transcends anything that we could ever argue about. And so when somebody says the American people, well, if you have 50.2% of the vote, you do not represent the American people. You only support the people that elect you. And we've got to be careful of that. I think AOC, when you look at the excitement of what she did, was she won in a landslide in her district. And yes, it was a Democratic district, but she still won in representing the people. And that's what Republicans and Democrats and Independents, Democratic Socialists or whatever, we have to remember, we're being elected to what you just said. You just said it perfectly, Santita. Our hopes and dreams are on the voice of that person that we send to the Congress, to the Senate, to the White House, to the Supreme Court. And we have to remember that. That's all I'm saying. And I just want to say that when you say the American people, come on now, be real. If you're a teacher that has 30 kids in your class and 16 of them are on task and 14 of them are not on task, you do not have a class of students. You have 16 students and 14 that you need to try to find some way to find out how they can be part of this future. That's all. That's what my perspective.
No, I hear you. I think it's a tremendous perspective. But I think in that case you do have 30 students. We just need to have a system that works for all of the students, because children are differently developed and differently gifted, and but these are the things that we need to be hammering out in this election process. And we need to make sure that these candidates, at least for me, I want to make sure that you are dedicated to building a robust public school system, a robust healthcare system. We're the only industrialized nation that does not have healthcare for all. That is crazy. You know, I mean, let me tell you, and I tell you as a woman, because there's so much in a woman's health. Everything, you know, when we are of a certain age, Latasha and Chapearl, we have to go to another doctor, and women have to monitor themselves every month, and that's as far as I'm going to go with that. And you have to continue to do that really for the rest of your life, because you're open to all of these different kinds of diseases and diseases and cancers and all of this stuff. And so many women, the poorer you are, the blacker you are, the browner you are, you don't go to the doctor. You can't afford the treatment, even if you have good insurance. The follow-up, it costs you too much money. The co-pays, all of this. I mean, affordable housing, a living wage, let alone a prosperity wage. You know, and I am so tired of someone else's greed being called capitalism and my need being called socialism. I'm sick of that.
It's so true. It's so true, Santita. And I think that what we're seeing, I'm telling you, the young folks ain't going for it. I will tell you.
Girl, no, they're not, girl, at all.
Are not going for it. The young folks that I was in, let me say, I did when my study group at Harvard, when I asked young people, both black and white, I asked if they were, if they thought America was a democracy. No hands went up. Was a true democracy. No hands went up. When I asked them, were they, and I had Republicans, young Republicans as well, if they were happy with the way that the country was going, I may have got 2 or 3 hands. The bottom line is there is a certain way, there's a couple of shifts, I think, generationally, that is going to shift the entire paradigm of politics in America. One, I think that the loyalty to the party loyalty is very different. Most of the students that I talk to, that I work with, I see that not just in the classroom and at the university, but when I am on the ground, they do not identify with political parties in the same way that my grandparents identified. I mean, I'm from the Generation X, and I don't identify with the party in the same way that my grandmother identified, and the younger ones under me certainly don't have any loyalty or sense of loyalty to the party. So I think that there is a major shift around how people are connected. I think you've got a generation of voters right now that are no longer going to buy into keeping the party in power at the expense of their circumstances not changing. It is just not going to happen.
People are tired of it. Very quickly, Mark.
I don't want it to be misunderstood. The fact that I know how the party structure works, the fact that I've been there, it's not an endorsement of the structure of how it is. Because since I have been involved in the party, it has been a part of challenging, making sure that grassroots issues were brought to the forefront. This is a continuing effort that some of us have been doing. But what throws us off is the idea to think that because we're fighting inside all the time. I mean, like Howard Dean, when he was chair of the party, he had a 15-state plan for the Democratic Party to grow. It turned out to be a 48, 49% plan because there were places like Illinois, which the party is so corrupt and held irresponsible at both the state and the local level. That bizarreness disrupted that whole apparatus. So understand, when you hear me, I don't know about anybody else, but when you hear me, who's been in the party who's been involved in party politics since I was 15 years old, and I say this is what happened or this is what it is, I'm just telling you what it is.
Okay, no, but we got that. But actually got it. But sometimes it sounds like you are giving cover to the party. I'm gonna put it right there. And I think you no, and what no no what you need to do is explain that and just be because remember I mean that's just it is what it is, and we're all gonna perceive or misperceive, and thank you for clearing that up. But I'm gonna get closing thoughts from everybody so that we can. But I didn't realize that Robert Patillo was still with us. Robert, you've been listening to us. What I want you to weigh in, sweetie. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is I think we're a little too early into the process for an existential crisis yet. Let's allow a few more people to vote before we decide to throw away the party structure. I just think the parties have to be more nimble, more able to change, because I think the bigger threat is somebody like Bloomberg, who can just show up, say that the only thing I need the party for is ballot access. I don't have to be a Democrat, just as Trump didn't need to be a Republican. And allow the oligarch class to pretty much dominate our political system through advertisement and targeted Facebook ads. I think the parties have to understand their real position and, in pursuit of becoming a big tent, not lose their fundamental values and what really makes them them. Because as we've seen through Bloomberg and Steyer, a lot of people are all but ready to betray the very values, the very criticisms they had for Trump, if it meant that they had the opportunity to beat Trump. So we have to have a soul-searching moment. We have to have a point in time right now where we decide who we are and what we are as a nation, as a democracy, and create a social system going forward which exists outside of that. Because all of the work that we've done in campaign finance reform and to expand democracy to no longer be the black cloak and smoke-filled rooms and make our decisions. It seems like the further we get away from that, we've circled right back around to it. And beyond Republican or Democrat or any other labels, we have to return value to the voices of the people and not simply the voices of the powerful.
I heard that. Let me go to, we're going to get some closing thoughts from everybody. Let me start with you, Mark.
Okay, my only closing thoughts is that, first of all, I hope to see people tonight at 6 o'clock at Push, and we can continue the conversation. The other point is that the only problem that the comments against Bloomberg haven't moved me is because understanding well, no, I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say this. I've seen the record, and the record is that he has put his resources in places where it was needed at times when it was not popular, and that's and we got to have somebody who's not just running for their ideals, but will have their ideals and their structure will empower, not capture, but empower all types of people, from school boards to our local councils to everything else. And I just think that you can only go by that by looking at what people have done. And that's where I'm at with it.
I hear you. Okay. I lived in New York, so I have a different view, but I hear you. But it's interesting to me that, I mean, yeah, please, because what, as you say something, what's interesting to me? There is a break between elites and the streets. And I think we have to acknowledge that with Bloomberg and this is really what the conversation we've been having today, Latasha, but you don't have to speak to that. What were you about to say?
What I was going to say is this idea that Bloomberg has put money out, which he has, but not really talk about who he's taking money from. And what does that mean? That anytime our folks are subjected to being criminalized, it is a devastating impact on our community. He has, with stop and frisk, just wasn't stopping people, it disrupted the lives of thousands and thousands of folks. 90% of the people that were stopped were innocent. My point is, you can't keep doing damage. Throw a little money at it, or throw some money at it, and all of a sudden that's supposed to make it okay. And it's not. That when you see what he did in terms of gentrification, when the housing community talks about what he supported with gentrification, and that the housing market, even they had to fight against him, and that affordable housing, that had a devastating impact on the pockets of people. And so let's not over-romanticize this
that there's one capitalist that does some good and does some charitable good, and that's supposed to be okay. We've seen that before. We've seen that playbook. We've seen this playbook of where you've got concentrated wealth and a wealthy person that, yes, they're going to give money at the expense on the other side of how much economic damage his policy has caused, particularly working class families. And so I am deeply offended when the solution is somebody wealthy just writing their checkbook when we're not really having an assessment of how that damage has been long-standing on folks. There are some folks, we can go back to Khalif Browder, this young man actually, because of the stress of him being unfairly, unjustly arrested, committed suicide. What is the price on his life?
Wait. And you know what? And only God knows what happened to him in Rikers Island. This was a young teenage boy who was put into Rikers Island, which is one of the most vicious prisons in America. And you need to do more than cut a check, because you know what? They settled with that child, and then he killed himself.
That's right. So ultimately, we're not going to get caught up in this capitalist discussion, this capitalist conversation that's one-sided around, I do some good, then that absolves me of any responsibility that I've had of the harm that I've caused. No, we're not doing that. That ultimately, what we have seen is we've seen the billionaire class. Let's be clear. Bloomberg is he is the 12th wealthiest person in the world. The 12th wealthiest person in the world. Fundamentally, why is it that we've got a dependent? So now he's even saying, even in his campaign, when he's saying, I am going to pay for everything myself, we think that that's okay. That means who is he going to be accountable to? I'm going to change. I'm going to use my money to influence the social landscape. Has he used his power and his influence as a billionaire to do that? Has his policies been reflected? Has he been reflective of that in terms of how he's advocated for government dollars to be more equitably distributed? No, he has not. And so ultimately, it is one thing to be the person with all the money and decide to buy a couple of pies, and it's another thing that you're a person that you believe that there should be an equity in resources so that people can buy the ingredients and make their own damn pies.
Well, now, there we go. So I'm getting closing thoughts. Tim, what you got to say, hon?
Well, I don't dislike any of the people in the Democratic race except for Bloomberg, because he's trying to buy his way in. And his megalomania and his narcissism and his power is something that our structure of democracy does not support. But
wait a minute, let me ask you this, Tim. Tim, are you a Republican? I mean, and this is not an accusation. I'm trying to make a point here. Are you a Republican, and do you plan to support the Republican nominee? Yes?
Many times.
No. I'm asking about this time, and this is not to beat you up. I'm trying to make a point.
No.
Are you planning to vote in the Democratic? Are you looking at maybe a blue candidate?
I would choose. Yes, I would choose. Last time around, I did not vote red for president.
Okay. I'm only asking this because you know what? With these guys, one of the things that we see from President Trump and Mayor Bloomberg is that party doesn't matter. They've been Democrat, they've been Republican, they've been independent. They don't care about that. A party is really this transactional for them. It is a means. It is not the end. It is not the end. They're just trying to use the system to get some things done. And I think it's important for us to be mindful of that. Okay?
Bernie Sanders. I try to look at the whole package in my research. As you know, I'm a pro-Second Amendment person. Bernie Sanders comes from a state where if you're legally allowed to own a firearm, you're also legally allowed to carry concealed. There's no permits, there's no regulations. He comes from a very free state, a very liberty-minded state. He does not scare me at all. Okay. And matter of fact, he is exciting in many ways. He comes from don't listen to the propaganda. Do your own research. Look at who's best for America, and then vote your conscience. We are not a democracy. We are a republic. So hopefully we're not teaching our kids that we're a democracy, because that's not true. We're a representative government that has to send the best people to represent our interests. And you said it perfectly earlier, Santita. And that's my closing. That's my closing. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me go to. Well, no, the best. Well, look, may the best man, human, woman win. Are you running, Latasha?
I am.
We love you.
I really appreciate the discussion, and I'm hoping that this leads to. I'm hoping that we see after this cycle a broader discussion. We keep grabbing hold to those things that are really distractions, and I do appreciate what the gentleman just said, that this isn't a Republican, this is not a democracy, it's a republic. But that's not what our children are taught in schools. That's the average American would not say that, would not know that, would not even know the distinction because of that. And I think that there has been an intentional dumbing down of America so those in power can continue to control and hold power. And so I am hoping that this is a moment that we're in for people, for us to take, my grandmother would say, what the devil meant for harm, God meant for good. I'm hoping that this moment in which Trump is actually showing the weaknesses in the system, because I think some people are in shock, because they're like, how could he do this? How could he do that? Because there's an enormous amount of power in that office of presidency, and it actually functions off this idea that whoever's in that office will adhere to the customs of that office, and not necessarily, there is a fragility of democracy that people have not been aware of, particularly, I think, white people in this country, because I think black folk, and particularly black folk in the South, have felt enough of the brunt of how undemocratic America has been, that it's not a big stretch for us to recognize and see some of the things that Trump is doing with his abuse of power, because we've been on the receiving end of the abuse of many electeds on both the Democrat and the Republican side as a group in this country. And so, but I do think, I am just hoping that this is a moment for us to really think about what is our radical reimagination of what it is that America could be. How could America really live up to the ideas that it says in the Constitution, where all men and women are created free and equal, and we recognize that, and we're recognizing their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, because the America that we're in has not been that America for all of its people. But I do believe that it is possible for us to become that, and so perhaps this is where we are right now to help get us a little bit closer to that. And if it is, I'm willing to go through the pain of this moment of not knowing, but we've got to get there. We can't just go back to what has not worked for all people. We've got to change and go differently and go harder.
Birth hurts, everybody. That's what I've been told. Let me get these closing remarks. Chaparral?
Yes, Santita, thank you so much for allowing me to be on today. I want to give you a brief story. My aunt called me the other day. She's 59 years old. She is a caretaker by trade. And she told me, she said, well, I just received a bill for $700 from the IRS. And I said, for what? She said, because I didn't have health care. And so that's the penalty I've been paying for the last 4 years for not having health care. I said, well, can't you apply for Medicaid? And she said, no, I make too much money for Medicaid. I said, well, what about Obamacare? And she says, I can't afford that. So it's a lot of people like my auntie that are stuck in the middle and that are being penalized for not being able to afford health care. This year, she had 2 unexpected emergency surgeries. She hasn't gotten those bills yet. She's afraid to open them. And so the reality is that these 4 years of $700 from the IRS for not having health insurance, plus the 2 emergency surgeries that she had today, it may actually push her into bankruptcy. This is the reality of folks not having health care in America. So when I hear people talk against Medicare for all, I ask them to remember that my aunt, who is in the middle, and there's so many more Americans like her. And we have to stop this thing that we don't need health care. Health care is life-saving treatment for everyone. Everyone needs it. And that's my closing thought.
It is something for us to remember. Attorney Patillo?
Absolutely. I think what we have to do going forward is understand that by the left eating itself, it simply makes it easier for 2 terms of Donald Trump. one term of Ivanka Trump, 2 more terms of Don Jr., and so on and so forth. We have to understand that what Republicans are doing right now is solidifying power. They're entrenching themselves in the judiciary. They're taking over the federal court system. And they can't wait for a fractured Democratic Party to limp into 2020, and so they'll be able to take back the House and get a 60-vote majority in the Senate. People like Doug Jones are sitting out there, people like Kristen Sinema in the Senate, let alone the people who are running like McGrath in Kentucky and Jamie Harris in South Carolina. This level of infighting on the Democratic side of the aisle does not help them win those seats, does not help to take power away from Mitch McConnell. People like Lucy McBeth in the House of Representatives who are in red districts. I know sometimes we like to imagine that everyone is running in Nancy Pelosi's district or running in AOC's district, but as a party, we have to understand that it does no good to not also think down ballot, because that's where more of the action is going to happen, not just there, but also in state and local races. So there needs to be a coalescence. There needs to be a come-to-Jesus moment for the party. What we saw from Republicans was, during the 2016 race, there was a huge anti-Trump agenda. There was Ted Cruz spoke out against Trump. Lindsey Graham spoke out against Trump. But once he was the nominee, everybody fell in line, and everybody has supported him. And if we're not able to do the same thing with whoever the eventual Democratic nominee is, then they will take back not just the House, not just the Senate, but all branches of government, and make the Democratic Party a pointless, migratory minority party without the ability to affect any policy. So we have to stop the infighting and start making a strategy to win going forward.
The final thought belongs to you, Dwight.
This party fetish that we have defies history. We've suffered under the Democrats, we've suffered under the Republicans. It's been really equal opportunity for us to suffer in the party system. And so we have to really vote our interests. In the words of my friend Cornel West, democracy really does matter. And democracy is fighting for your interest. And so that has to transcend party. That has to really be locked into who is willing to operate in your best interest, whatever you call them, and whatever they call themselves. We really can't be intimidated by labels and by names. We have to deal with platforms and policy.
Everybody, let's get to the substance. We've had a long chat with you all today, but I want to thank all of you. Robert Patillo, attorney Robert Patillo, brilliant lawyer. Latasha Brown, brilliant, from Black Voters Matter. Can't wait to see you in South Carolina. Girly girl, Dwight McKee, brilliant. Oh yes, girl, we're gonna have a great time. Social scientist, boy oh boy, and he has witnessed so much history. He's been a part of so much of it. I'm always so glad that all of you can come together. And Chapearl and Mark, love you all so much. Love your dynamism, your activism, and the fact that you all are in the fight. I mean, Chapearl and Mark, I love it, and I love you. I love you all. Everybody, I will see you tomorrow here on the Santita Jackson Show on behalf of Lady B.
I'll get over there.
Thank you, Mateo. Get over there quickly. Oh my God, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. And Cortez in absentia, and we've got Nikos on the other side, because it's a team. Teamwork makes the dream work. That's how we make this happen every day. I love you all. Thank you all so much, and thank you for your support of this show. I mean, we've been so blessed. We're expanding the show, and the show's it's the #1 show here. And it's because of you. And we hope that we speak to what it is that you want us to speak to, really. We hope that we're speaking to your needs, because this show is really in service of you. We serve you. That is what we try to do. Love you, everybody. See you tomorrow. Remember, like and share. Like and share this on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. And like and subscribe, everybody, over on the Santita Jackson Show on YouTube. Need you to do that. Love you, everybody. See you in the morning.